Once upon a time, in the vast Persian Empire, a humble young woman named Hadassah lived quietly among her people, the Jews, in the city of Susa. Though her life was simple, her story was destined to shape the course of history. Esther was an orphan, raised lovingly by her cousin Mordecai, who taught her to trust in the God of her ancestors. As she grew, her beauty, grace, and kindness became evident to all who knew her. But Hadassah never sought glory. She only wanted to live a peaceful life. Fate, however, had other plans. At that time, King Xerxes ruled over Persia with unmatched power. One day, after a grand feast, the king commanded his queen Vashti to appear before his court to display her beauty, but Vashti refused, angering the king. In his fury, Xerxes deposed her and issued a decree to find a new queen. Across the empire, messengers sought out the most beautiful young women to join the royal palace's harem. Among those taken was Hadassah, though she went by her Persian name, Esther, to conceal her Jewish identity. Esther was brought to the king's palace, where she underwent months of preparation. When her turn came to meet King Xerxes, her beauty and humility captivated him. Without hesitation, he placed the royal crown upon her head, making her the Queen of Persia. But even as she wore the crown, Esther remained true to her faith and heritage. Mordecai, ever watchful, warned her to keep her Jewish identity a secret, a threat to her people. Not long after Esther became queen, trouble brewed in the kingdom. Haman, a proud and cunning man, rose to power as the king's chief advisor. Haman expected everyone to bow before him, but Mordecai refused, declaring that he would bow only to God. Haman's pride turned to rage, and he devised a wicked plan. Learning that Mordecai was a Jew, Haman sought to destroy not just him, but all the Jews in the empire. He convinced King Xerxes to issue a decree that, on a single day, all Jews would be killed. The king, unaware of Esther's heritage, agreed, and the decree was sealed with his ring. When Mordecai learned of the plot, he tore his clothes and sat in sackcloth and ashes at the city gate. Word of his grief reached Esther, and she sent a servant to ask what troubled him. Mordecai sent back a message. "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone will escape. If you remain silent, deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows, perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Esther's heart was heavy. To approach the king without being summoned was to risk death, even as queen. But Mordecai's words stirred her courage. Esther's bold plan. After 3 days of fasting and prayer, Esther prepared to act. She donned her royal robes and approached the king's throne room. As she stepped into the hall, her heart pounded. Would Xerxes extend his golden scepter to spare her life? The king looked up, and his expression softened. He extended the scepter, and Esther approached, relief washing over her. "What is it, Queen Esther?" he asked. "Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you." Esther, with wisdom and grace, invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the feast, she invited them again to a second banquet the next day. Haman, filled with pride, thought himself highly favored by the queen. That night, however, the king could not sleep. He ordered the royal records to be read to him, and discovered that Mordecai had once saved his life by uncovering a plot against him. The king realized that Mordecai had never been rewarded. The next day, as Haman came to the palace to request Mordecai's execution, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Haman, thinking the king meant himself, suggested a lavish parade. To his horror, the king commanded Haman to honor Mordecai in this way. Haman led Mordecai through the streets of Susa, humiliated. The queen's courage. At the second banquet, the king asked Esther again, "What is your request, Queen Esther?" "Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Taking a deep breath, Esther revealed her heart. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases you, spare my life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold to destruction, slaughter, and annihilation." The king's face darkened. Who would dare to do such a thing? Esther pointed at Haman. "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." The room fell silent, and Haman's face turned pale. The king, enraged, stormed out into the garden. When he returned, he found Haman begging Esther for mercy, which only deepened the king's fury. Haman was executed on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Victory and celebration. The king issued a new decree, allowing the Jews to defend themselves against their enemies. On the appointed day, the Jews triumphed, and Mordecai was elevated to a position of great honor in the kingdom. Esther's bravery and faith saved her people. She remained a beloved queen, her story a beacon of hope and courage for generations to come. And so, the tale of Queen Esther reminds us that even the most unlikely among us can rise to greatness when we act with courage, wisdom, and faith.